The moment I walked through that door, holding my 3-day-old daughter, my life shattered. What I found inside our home wasn't a warm welcome. It was a betrayal so deep, it fundamentally changed everything. Just days before, my husband Aaron and I had poured our hearts into transforming one of our spare rooms. We painted the pale yellow walls together, hand-stenciled clouds, and lovingly restored a vintage oak crib. It was going to be Emma's nursery, a sacred space filled with love and anticipation for our baby girl. Then, after 23 grueling hours of back labor, ending in an emergency intervention and stitches, Emma arrived. I was discharged, barely able to walk, with strict instructions for bed rest. I called my parents to pick me up, expecting to be greeted by a joyous, if exhausted, welcome home. Instead, as I stepped into our house, my entire family, my mother-in-law Diane and my sister-in-law Brooklyn, were gathered in my baby's nursery. The hospital discharge papers felt like they were disintegrating in my trembling hands. Emma stirred gently in her carrier, completely unaware that the world we'd built for her had been completely taken over. Brooklyn sat there, in the very rocking chair I'd picked out from an estate sale, nursing her baby, scrolling on her phone, with an expression that screamed triumphant satisfaction. The mobile Aaron had assembled, the one I'd read instructions aloud for, now turned slowly above her child's head. Our carefully chosen gender-neutral bedding? Stripped away. Replaced with Brooklyn's things. "Oh, you're here," Diane announced from behind me, her voice dripping with false cheer. "Look how beautiful they look. The room just suits her baby so perfectly." She gestured grandly at Brooklyn. Then came the chilling words. "You can use the guest room. It's smaller, but Emma won't know the difference. Besides, Brooklyn needs the space more. She's recovering from a difficult delivery." My own delivery had left me stitched up and barely mobile. I could feel the blood draining from my face. I looked at Aaron, my husband of 7 years, the man who had cried with joy when we first saw Emma's heartbeat. He stood beside his mother, arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. "Look," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "She just had a baby too. My mother said she deserves it more than you. Don't you dare say anything." My throat tightened. The hallway behind me was a graveyard of our dreams. Boxes, filled with everything from Emma's nursery, were stacked haphazardly. The handmade quilt my grandmother had sent, a precious heirloom, lay crumpled on top like trash. First edition children's books, collected long before Aaron and I even met, were crammed into a splitting cardboard box. The little moon-shaped nightlight, its cord tangled, lay on its side. It was all there, discarded in the hallway, like we were discarded. Something inside me, something I didn't even know was there, went absolutely silent. The part that had spent 7 years trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the part that made excuses, that bent, that accommodated, that smiled through gritted teeth. It just stopped. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but steady. Diane actually laughed. A condescending, dismissive sound that made my blood run cold. "Excuse me? This is my son's house too. You don't get to tell us what to do." "Get out," I repeated, louder this time, the rage in my chest finally finding its voice. "All of you. Right now." Aaron took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. "Babe, you're tired. The hormones are probably making you emotional. Let's just..." Do not finish that sentence. My eyes for the first time locked directly onto his. "Your sister and your mother have exactly 10 minutes to gather their belongings and leave. The nursery will be returned to its original state within the hour. If any of you are still here after that, I will call the police." Brooklyn, for the first time, looked up from her phone, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Aaron, are you going to let her talk to us like this?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he saw in my face, whatever unyielding resolve, made him take a step back. "You've lost your mind," Diane declared, but she was already moving, heading toward the hallway. "Aaron, this is exactly what I warned you about. She's controlling. Manipulative. This is abuse." I pulled out my phone and began dialing. 911. "I'm calling now. You're trespassing in my home." The scramble that followed would have been comedic if it hadn't been so heartbreakingly real. Brooklyn grabbed her diaper bag, fumbling to wrap her baby in a blanket. Diane rushed to help her daughter, shooting me looks that could have curdled milk. Aaron's father, Walter, who had been a silent observer this entire time, just shook his head and walked out without a word. Aaron, meanwhile, remained planted in the hallway, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. "We need to talk about this," he said once his family had cleared out, the front door slamming behind them. "No, we don't." I walked past him, each step sending a jolt of pain through my body, but I ignored it. I entered the nursery and began the agonizing process of moving Brooklyn's items into the hallway. Aaron watched for a moment, then Walter's voice called from the front door. "Son, we're waiting in the car. We need to discuss this situation." And just like that, my husband of 7 years, the father of my 3-day-old daughter, left me. Standing alone in our home, surrounded by the wreckage of our nursery, he chose to go sit with a family that had just violated every boundary imaginable. He didn't come back that night. Or the next morning. His phone went straight to voicemail. I spent those first hours, those first vulnerable days, putting the nursery back together. My own parents, after I called them in tears, arrived like angels. My mother, Janet, held Emma while my father, Kenneth, rehung the curtains and reassembled the crib. They didn't ask questions. They just helped. They stayed in the guest room, the one Brooklyn had apparently deemed too small. On the third day, Aaron sent a text. Mom wants to apologize. Can we come over? I didn't respond. Instead, I called a lawyer. Then I called a locksmith. By the time Aaron showed up that evening, his mother in tow, the locks had been changed. The look on his face when his key didn't work? Almost worth the exhaustion and pain. He knocked, then pounded, then called my phone repeatedly. I sat in the nursery feeding Emma, letting every call go to voicemail. Eventually my father answered the door. I heard raised voices, heard Aaron demanding to be let in, heard my father's calm, firm response. You can speak to her lawyer. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked. Silence returned. By the way, if you're still with me on this roller coaster of a story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, there are more wild tales where this came from. That was 8 months ago. The first week after changing the locks was brutal. Aaron called 43 times in 3 days. My phone kept a record. Each voicemail grew progressively more desperate, then angry, then pleading. His mother left messages too. Her voice laced with false concern about my mental state and how I was depriving Emma of her father. I saved every single one. My parents stayed for 2 weeks, sleeping in shifts to help with Emma's night feedings. My mother would gently take Emma from my arms when exhaustion made my hands shake. My father installed additional security cameras and a video doorbell. He didn't say much, but I caught him watching the footage from that terrible day over and over, his jaw clenched tight. I never liked him. He finally admitted one morning over coffee. Aaron always seemed like he was performing being a good husband, rather than actually being one. But I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being an overprotective father. You weren't wrong, I said, staring into my mug. The messages from Aaron's family didn't stop. Brooklyn sent a lengthy text about how I was overreacting, how families help each other, how she couldn't believe I was being so selfish. Walter, who had been silent during the confrontation, sent a brief message hoping I'd reconsider my rash decisions for Emma's sake. I blocked all of them except Aaron. I needed a record for legal purposes. My best friend Tessa arrived with groceries and takeout. She held Emma while I showered for the first time in days, standing under the hot water until it ran cold. When I emerged, she'd cleaned my kitchen and was rocking my daughter with practiced ease. I called a lawyer for you, Tessa said without preamble. Her name is Patricia, LOL. She specializes in family law and has a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when the situation calls for it. She can see you tomorrow at 10 if you're up for it. I wasn't sure I was up for anything, but I nodded anyway. Patricia, LOL, turned out to be a woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in neat shorthand. When I showed her the security footage, her expression shifted from professional interest to cold fury. This is going to be easier than I thought, she said, rewinding to watch Diane and Brooklyn's conversation again. Not easy but easier. They've documented their own malice. That's rare. What happens now? I asked, Emma sleeping against my shoulder. Now we file for divorce and emergency custody orders. Given that Aaron abandoned you and your newborn, and given this footage showing a pattern of family dysfunction, we should be able to get temporary full custody while the divorce proceeds. He'll get supervised visitation at most until we go to trial. The word trial made my stomach drop. This is going to court? Most likely. Based on what you've told me about Aaron and his mother, they're not going to accept a settlement that gives you primary custody. They'll fight. Which is good for us, actually. The more they fight, the more opportunities they have to reveal exactly who they are. She was right. The divorce papers were filed within the week. Aaron fought for custody, claiming I was mentally unstable due to postpartum issues. His mother provided a lengthy statement about my erratic behavior and refusal to accommodate family. But I had text messages. I had witnesses, my parents. Tessa. The hospital had documentation of my condition. And most damaging of all, I had the security camera footage Aaron didn't know I'd installed 2 months before Emma was born. The custody evaluation process was grueling. A court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Vincent Rodas, interviewed us all. I brought my parents. Aaron brought Diane, Walter, and Brooklyn. The joint session was a disaster for them. Dr. Rodas asked Diane to explain her version of events. She launched into a detailed explanation about how she was simply trying to help, how Brooklyn had nowhere else to go, how I was being unreasonable and hormonal. So, you used a key to enter their home while they were at the hospital? Dr. Rodas asked mildly. It's my son's home too. I have a right to be there. Did you have permission to rearrange the nursery? Diane's face flushed. I didn't need permission. I'm his mother. I see. Dr. Rodas made a note. And you moved all of the prepared nursery items into the hallway. They were in the way. Brooklyn needed that room. Even though your son's wife was returning from the hospital with a newborn, she could use the guest room. It's not like the baby would notice. I watched Dr. Rodas's pen move, his expression carefully neutral. Aaron shifted uncomfortably beside his mother, finally seeming to realize how badly this was going. Brooklyn tried to help, jumping in with her own explanation about her difficult delivery, her need for support, how family should come together. She painted herself as the victim. Then Dr. Rodas asked to see the footage. The conference room went silent as the video played. Diane's voice came through clearly as she directed Brooklyn, as she laughed about how I would react, as she told Aaron this would teach me my place. Brooklyn's smug agreement. Aaron's weak protests followed by his acceptance, his willing participation in boxing up everything his wife had prepared. When it ended, Diane tried to explain it away. That's taken out of context. You don't understand our family dynamics. Help me understand, Dr. Rodas said, his voice quiet but firm. What context makes it acceptable to take over a postpartum mother's prepared nursery? She couldn't answer. Neither could Aaron, though he tried, his explanation circling back to his mother's wishes, his sister's needs, his belief that I would get over it. My session, by contrast, was straightforward. I had documentation, hospital records, texts from Aaron showing our joint planning, receipts, photos of us decorating, statements from my parents. Dr. Rodas spent an hour with Emma and me, observing how I fed her, changed her, soothed her. He watched me handle her with the easy confidence that comes from being someone's primary caregiver. Then he observed Aaron's supervised visit. Emma cried when Aaron held her. She didn't recognize him. He didn't know how to comfort her, how she liked to be held, what her different cries meant. After 20 minutes, he handed her back to the supervisor in frustration. She's being difficult, he complained. She's 4 weeks old, the supervisor replied dryly. She doesn't know you. The psychological evaluation report was damning. Dr. Rodas noted Aaron's concerning enmeshment with his mother, his inability to prioritize his nuclear family, his lack of empathy. He recommended I retain primary custody, with Aaron receiving only supervised visitation, until he could demonstrate appropriate boundaries and complete co-parenting classes. The report on Diane was even worse, describing her behavior as manipulative and controlling, noting her complete lack of insight. Aaron's lawyer tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. 3 months after I changed the locks, we stood in family court. Aaron's lawyer argued I had overreacted, that it was a family misunderstanding. Patricia LOL stood up with her tablet. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this evidence. The judge watched in silence, his expression darkening. When it ended, he turned to Aaron. Mr. Hayes, you stood by while your mother and sister took over a nursery your wife had prepared. You then left your wife alone with a newborn for 3 days, to, and I quote from your text messages, give her time to cool down. Do I have that correct? Aaron's face was pale. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned to Diane. Ma'am, do you maintain your actions were appropriate? Diane stood defiant. I was helping my family. That woman has turned my son against me. By refusing to let you make decisions about her home and her child? The judge's tone was ice. Sit down, ma'am. The ruling came swiftly. Full custody to me. Aaron received supervised visitation every other Saturday for 2 hours, ordered to complete a co-parenting program. Diane was explicitly forbidden from attending visitations or having unsupervised contact with Emma. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my daughter's father, reduced to a stranger she saw twice a month under supervision. This was the man I'd married, who I'd loved, who I'd planned a life with. The reality settled over me like a weight. The court battle had taken 3 months, Emma growing and changing through every hearing. She was 4 months old when the judge issued his ruling. But that wasn't the revenge. That was just survival. The revenge came later, in the ripple effects. I realized Diane worked as an administrative coordinator for a large medical practice, a job that demanded patient confidentiality and sound judgment. Her employer, part of a hospital network, had strict policies on employee conduct. I didn't have to do anything directly. Tessa, who happened to work in the compliance department at that same hospital network, saw the footage when I showed her what had happened. She was horrified, not just as my friend, but as someone whose job required her to report concerning behavior. The footage showed Diane using a key to enter someone else's home without permission, orchestrating a takeover, discussing manipulation. Tessa felt obligated to mention to her supervisor that an employee might have judgment issues. The hospital investigated. Diane defended herself, insisting she had every right to make decisions about her son's household. She was fired within 2 weeks. Not specifically for the nursery incident, but because her response demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding about boundaries, consent, and appropriate behavior. Her termination letter cited concerns about her judgment and ability to maintain professional standards. Brooklyn faced consequences too, though I had nothing to do with those. Her husband, Marcus, saw the footage when it became part of the court record. Learning that his wife had participated in bullying a woman who had just given birth, taking over a nursery that didn't belong to her, and showing no remorse, it made him reconsider their relationship. Marcus called me one evening, about 2 weeks after the custody hearing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I had no idea what Brooklyn did. She told me you were having mental health issues and had kicked her out when she came to visit. I believed her. Why are you calling me?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Because I watched the footage. The court sent me a copy, since Brooklyn's involvement affects our custody arrangement. I've been married to her for 4 years, and I never saw that side of her before. Or maybe I did, and I just made excuses for it." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "She laughed on that video. She laughed about taking your baby's room while you were in the hospital. And when I confronted her about it, she still didn't see anything wrong with what she did. She said Diane was right, that you needed to be put in your place." "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," I said, and I truly meant it. "I'm filing for divorce. I'm asking for primary custody. I can't have my son growing up thinking that behavior is normal. That's not the kind of man I want him to become." He cleared his throat. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in Aaron's family is like them, and I wanted to apologize for not seeing it sooner. Last I heard, through mutual acquaintances, they were separated, and Marcus had primary custody of their son. Aaron lost his job as well, though again I didn't engineer it. His employer saw the court documents during a routine background check update. The company prided itself on family values and ethical behavior. Having an employee whose personal conduct included abandoning his wife and newborn to take his mother's side didn't align with their image. They offered him the option to resign rather than be terminated. He took it. I found out about it from an unexpected source. Aaron's father, Walter, showed up at my door one Saturday morning, about a month after the custody hearing, looking 20 years older than he had just months before. "I won't take much of your time," he said, Emma on my hip. "I just wanted to see my granddaughter and to tell you that I'm sorry. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't close the door either. Diane and I are divorcing," he continued. "I've spent 32 years making excuses for her behavior, enabling her control over Aaron and Brooklyn. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being supportive. The truth is I was a coward. I watched her turn our children into extensions of herself, and I did nothing." He looked at Emma, his eyes sad. "She's beautiful. She looks like Aaron did as a baby. What do you want, Walter?" I asked, not unkindly. "Permission to be part of her life. Not now. I understand I need to earn that. But someday if you're willing. I'm moving out of state to stay with my brother for a while, getting some distance from Diane and the situation. But I'd like to send birthday cards, maybe Christmas gifts. Let her know she has a grandfather who cares about her, even if he failed her father." I considered it. This man had stood silent while his wife orchestrated the nursery takeover. He'd enabled decades of dysfunction. But he was also here, taking responsibility, asking rather than demanding. "Send me your new address when you're settled," I said finally. "We'll see." He nodded, understanding that was the best he was going to get. "Thank you. And for what it's worth, you're a good mother. Emma is lucky to have you." After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, Emma playing with my hair. The ripple effects of that one day kept spreading outward. Marriages ending, jobs lost, families fracturing. All because Diane had decided her authority extended into my home, my life, my child. Sometimes I wondered if I'd set off something I couldn't control. Then I remembered the boxes in the hallway, the smug look on Brooklyn's face, Aaron's dismissive tone when he told me not to dare say anything. I remembered being in pain, exhausted, vulnerable, and being treated like my feelings didn't matter. No, I hadn't set off anything. They had done that themselves with their choices. I had simply refused to absorb the impact silently. The house, which Aaron had insisted was as much his as mine, turned out to be primarily in my name, due to inheritance money from my grandfather that had funded the down payment. The divorce settlement gave me full ownership in exchange for waiving claims to Aaron's retirement account. I considered it an excellent trade. I sold the house 2 months after the divorce finalized. Too many bad memories. Emma and I moved across town into a smaller place that was entirely ours. My parents helped with childcare when I went back to work. Life found a new rhythm. The moving process itself was cathartic. I went through every room, every closet, every drawer. Wedding photos went into a box for the attic. Maybe someday Emma would want to see them, to know who her father was before everything fell apart. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I'd keep them for her to decide. I found love letters Aaron had written me when we were dating. Poetry, terrible and earnest and sweet. Cards from anniversaries. The Christmas ornament from our first holiday together. Evidence of a man who had once loved me, or at least loved the idea of me. What happened to him? I found myself wondering. When did he become someone who would choose his mother's approval over his wife's dignity? My therapist, Dr. Angela Ramos, suggested it had always been there, just hidden under layers of romantic gestures and good intentions. People don't change, she said during one of our sessions. They reveal. The nursery incident didn't create Aaron's priorities. It exposed them. I'd started therapy 2 weeks after changing the locks. Dr. Ramos specialized in postpartum issues and family trauma. She didn't sugarcoat things or offer empty platitudes. Instead, she asked hard questions that made me think. Do you feel guilty? She asked during one session. About what? About the consequences. The job's lost, the marriage is ending. I thought about it. Sometimes. Late at night, when Emma was asleep and I was alone with my thoughts. I wondered if I could have handled it differently. How? I don't know. Been more understanding. Given them a chance to apologize. Would an apology have been enough? Dr. Ramos leaned forward. After they literally gave away your child's nursery? After Aaron abandoned you to go sit with them in the car? Probably not, I admitted. So the guilt isn't about whether you did the right thing. It's about whether you're allowed to have boundaries that cause other people discomfort. She was right, though it took me weeks to fully internalize it. I'd been raised to be accommodating, to smooth things over, to prioritize other people's feelings. The nursery incident had shattered that conditioning like glass. Returning to work was harder than I expected. I worked as a project manager for a construction company, coordinating timelines and managing contractors. The job required focus and organization, both of which felt impossible in the fog of new motherhood and divorce proceedings. My boss Gregory Nash called me into his office my first week back. How are you holding up? He asked, his voice kind but professional. I'm managing, I said, though we both knew it was a lie. Listen, I heard about what happened. Not the details, but enough to know you've been through hell. If you need to adjust your hours or work from home more often while you figure things out, we can make that happen. I almost cried from the simple kindness of it. Thank you. I might take you up on that. He nodded. Family is important, but so is knowing when family is toxic. My ex-wife's parents tried to take my kids from me during our divorce. Claimed I was unfit because I worked too much. I had to fight for 2 years to get joint custody. So, I understand what you're dealing with at least a little. Having Gregory's support made the transition back to work bearable. I adjusted my hours, working early mornings before Emma woke and late evenings after she went to bed, taking long lunch breaks to handle the constant stream of legal appointments and court dates. My coworkers were supportive too once they found out. Jennifer from accounting brought frozen meals. Thomas from logistics offered to help me move when I sold the house. Rita from HR made sure I was taking advantage of every benefit available to me. You've got a village here, Rita told me one afternoon. Don't be afraid to lean on us. It was such a contrast to Aaron's family, where help came with strings and expectations. Here, people offered support without demanding anything in return. It made me realize how dysfunctional Aaron's family dynamics had been, how abnormal their behavior was. Emma thrived despite the chaos surrounding her. She hit her milestones right on schedule. Rolling over at 4 months, sitting up at 5.5, babbling and reaching for toys. Her pediatrician, Dr. Sarah Hendress, commented on how well-adjusted she seemed during Emma's 6-month checkup. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, Dr. Hendress said. She's happy and healthy. That's all that matters. I wanted to tell her that what I was doing was surviving barely, on 4 hours of sleep and pure determination, but I just smiled and nodded. Aaron's supervised visits were painful to watch. He showed up, spent 2 hours awkwardly playing with a daughter who didn't know him, then left. Sometimes he brought gifts, toys that were age inappropriate, or a stuffed animal that was too large and potentially dangerous for a 6-month-old. Board books when she was still putting everything in her mouth. The supervisor, a kind woman named Louise Hart, gently corrected him each time. Maybe hold off on that until she's older. Here, try these soft blocks instead. I felt sorry for him sometimes, watching through the one-way mirror in the visitation center. He'd wanted to be a father. He'd been excited about the pregnancy, involved in preparing the nursery, present at doctor's appointments. But when it came down to choosing between his child and his mother's approval, he'd chosen wrong. Could he have come back from it if he'd apologized immediately? If he'd shown up the next day horrified at what he'd allowed to happen? Ready to make amends? Maybe. Probably not. But instead he doubled down. Brought his mother to apologize, as if Diane saying sorry would fix the violation. Fought me for custody instead of accepting responsibility. Made me the villain in his story instead of looking at his own actions. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Ours was ash. By the time Emma turned 7 months old, Aaron had been through the co-parenting program but still showed no real understanding of what he'd done wrong. His requests for unsupervised visitation were consistently denied. Aaron sends child support, though it's garnished from whatever odd jobs he manages to find. He shows up for his supervised visits, though Emma barely knows him. Diane tried to sue me for grandparent visitation rights, but the court laughed that request out of the building given the documented history. The thing nobody tells you about revenge is that it's rarely satisfying in the way you imagine it will be. I didn't feel triumphant when Diane lost her job. I felt tired. I didn't celebrate when Brooklyn's marriage fell apart. I felt sad for her son, who deserved better than to be used as a pawn in his grandmother's power plays. But I did feel something close to peace when I put Emma down in her crib every night in our new home. The same crib Aaron and I had restored together, now in a nursery decorated entirely by my own hands. The same mobile hanging overhead. The same books on the shelf, though they needed to be reordered. Emma is 8 months old now. She smiles when she sees me. She started trying to pull herself up on furniture. She has no idea that her first days of life were marked by such ugliness. And if I have anything to say about it, she never will. Tessa came over last week with dinner and wine. We sat on my back porch while Emma napped, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Blowing everything up like that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the marriage that ended, about the family that fractured, about the jobs lost and relationships destroyed. "No," I said finally. "They made a choice when they decided to treat me like I didn't matter. Like my feelings, my pain, my needs were less important than Brooklyn's wants. Aaron chose his mother over his wife and newborn daughter. That was their decision. I just made sure there were consequences." Tessa nodded, sipping her wine. "You know Diane is telling everyone who will listen that you're vindictive and cruel." "Probably," I shrugged. "But everyone who matters knows the truth. And the people who don't know the truth don't matter." My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Aaron was requesting a modification to the custody arrangement, wanting unsupervised visits. The request included a letter from Diane stating she'd completed anger management courses and wanted to be part of Emma's life. I showed the text to Tessa, who rolled her eyes. "What are you going to do?" "Oppose it," I said, setting my phone down. "Maybe in a few years if Aaron can demonstrate genuine change. But Emma is 8 months old. She needs stability, not a grandmother who thinks taking over a nursery is acceptable behavior, and a father who enabled it." The baby monitor on the patio table crackled with Emma's wake-up sounds. I stood, feeling only the slightest twinge from my long-heeled stitches, and went inside to get my daughter. She beamed when she saw me, her whole face lighting up. I lifted her from the crib, breathing in that perfect baby smell, and carried her to the window. The sunset was still painting the sky in brilliant colors. "That's going to be your world someday," I told her softly. "Beautiful and bright and full of possibilities. And you're going to know that you matter. That your space is yours. That nobody gets to push you aside or tell you to accept less than you deserve." Emma grabbed my nose, giggling. I laughed, kissing her forehead. Somewhere across town, Aaron was probably still trying to figure out how everything went so wrong. Diane was probably still playing the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I was the problem. Brooklyn was probably still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. But here in our home in the nursery I fought to reclaim, none of that mattered. Emma was safe. I was healing. We were building a life on our own terms. And if that made me vindictive in their eyes, I could live with that. I'd rather be vindictive and whole than accommodating and broken. The sunset faded to twilight. I changed Emma's diaper, fed her, played with her until she yawned. When I put her down for the night, she went easily, secure in the knowledge that her world was stable and safe. I stood in the doorway of the nursery for a moment, remembering that awful day. The shock, the betrayal, the moment I decided I was done being pushed around. Then I turned off the light and walked away. The past was the past. Tomorrow, Emma and I had a playdate with another mother from the neighborhood. Next week, I had a job interview for a promotion. Next month, we were taking a trip to visit my parents. Life was moving forward as it always does. What about you? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it meant breaking ties? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.